My name is Lindsay, and this is my audience. Hey, everybody. All right. This is Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech.
A dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together.
On August 28, 1963, Martin Luther King gave one of his most memorable speeches in history. I Have a Dream. Not only was it a defining moment in his life and throughout his career as a civil rights activist, but it was also a defining moment in history. On that day in Washington, D.C., he stood in front of 250,000 people on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. His speech is a great example of how well of a speaker Martin Luther King was, and the determination he had to change the way people thought and felt about African Americans. Listening to his speech, I Have a Dream, shows many qualities of a good, effective speaker. Scott Epplum, author of an article about the qualities that made Martin Luther King, Jr. a great speaker, gives several examples of the techniques he used throughout his speech. One being the cadence he used when he would begin his speech, to the aggressiveness it turned into by the end of it. His pace grew faster and louder as his audience cheered him on. He's practiced his speeches over and over, and as any good speaker practices their speech, they do it to perfection. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech was drafted and rewritten and looked over many times, but still 12 hours before his speech, he was undecided on what he wanted to talk about. Although in his original draft, I Have a Dream was never listed, that became the title of his speech. His repetitiveness during his speech also made it stronger because by repeating that phrase, I have a dream, over and over, he was getting his exact point across to what he wanted to accomplish. Finally, the connection he had with his audience, the positive energy his audience gave off, gave him more enthusiasm. Using these techniques really got the attention he needed, which made for more powerful speeches. He was known to use these throughout all of his speeches, which made them so easy to understand. It was impossible to want to fall asleep, but more like the want for him to keep going. After his speech, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, named Man of the Year, and his speech was ranked the top speech of the 20th century by a poll of academics. Stated by a blog about Martin Luther King's leadership called Great Leaders Who Serve, gives many reasons as to why people followed his words. A few saying that he was called to lead, he was sold out to his cause, his passion about his mission, and how he was clear in his communication. He connected with his audience, he was consistent in his message, he lived the values he espoused, he was willing to sacrifice for the cause, and he was dedicated to serving others. All attributes that enhanced his leadership and made his voice be known to all. This did not come easy, though. Martin Luther King went through a lot of torture and hatred by many people, and it is unbelievable how he stuck to his words. And no matter how many times he was talked down upon, no matter how many times he was abused, he still never physically fought back. No question, it made him angry, but he used his anger as more reason to keep going, to fight verbally about what he wanted to accomplish. His emotion turned into energy, commitment, and sacrifice. According to an article in LSU's library database on Martin Luther King called A Biographical Sketch, says he was arrested 30 times. This shows how committed he was. Also, it was said that in his jail cell is where he wrote many of his famous speeches. It seemed to be be not a moment. It seemed to be not a moment went by without the thought of what he could say next was on his mind. He showed many people that if you fight for what you believe, good things will prevail. These are the qualities that made Martin Luther King one of the most influential speakers of all time. Any questions?
Do you happen to know how he maintained his positive attitude and didn't get angry?
Yeah, he channeled his anger into a higher purpose. On one of the occasions he wrote in his autobiography that Monday I went home with a heavy heart. He wrote in his autobiography, I was weighed down by a terrible sense of guilt, remembering that on 2 or 3 occasions I had allowed myself to become angry and indignant. I had spoken hastily and resentfully, yet I knew that this was no way to solve the problem. You must not harbor anger. I abolished myself. You will be willing to suffer the anger of the opponent and yet not return anger. You must not become bitter. No matter how emotional your opponents are, you must be calm. Great leaders do not ignore their anger,